by the end of the day, we are all going to know how to implement AI in our workplaces.
You do need champions in different departments to lead the change, but there also needs to be a business reason to adopt AI.
We will live in a world where humans and agents will be coexisting almost forever.
Once you start to think of it as a teammate, then things start to go much better.
Much better for your productivity.
And that makes AI incredibly powerful.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So the theme for today is Beyond Pilots. And I think it captures something that probably every leader in this room has felt and experienced. And that is, in so many ways, pilots are the easy part. What matters more is moving beyond the pilots, moving beyond the technology that just works as part of the flashy demo, and investing in technology that truly understands how your organization works, your tools, your employees, your probably very messy cross-functional workflows. And that's something that we think about every day at Glean. Glean is a leading work AI platform that deeply understands how your organization works with generative AI search, powerful assistant, and intelligent agents. The reality is, so many AI tools, so many AI transformations, they're not failing right now because the models aren't powerful enough or aren't capable enough. They're failing because the technology doesn't understand the organizational context. And similarly, we see so many AI strategies fail, not because of a lack of ambition, but because they fail to understand the human potential and the human factors that are at play, the frictions, the fears, the very real human resistance to change that is at the core of so much of this. And so that's what today is about. It's about learning from incredible leaders who are in the trenches, helping their organizations navigate these transitions, the shift from hype to real results. And it's my privilege to introduce someone who approaches this conversation with so much curiosity, so much intentionality, and so much rigor as well. Nick Thompson, the CEO of The Atlantic. Please join me in welcoming Nick to the stage.
Thank you so much. All right, this is going to be really fun. We're going to have a fabulous day, lots of good conversations. Glean has been a great partner. We just had a fabulous lunch talking about all kinds of hard things in AI. So by the end of the day, we are all going to know how to implement AI in our workplaces, how to solve all the organizational structure problems, how to solve all the personal problems, how to solve the efficiency problems. So now let's start with trust issues. So please welcome to the stage, Connie Noonan Hadley. She's an organizational psychologist, founder and chief scientist of the Institute for Life at Work. She's written all kinds of really smart and interesting papers. Stephen Wunker, the founder and managing director of New Market Advisors, co-author of the Octopus Organization. Isn't that a great title, the Octopus Organization? I think that's awesome. Chris Duffey, head of AI product strategy and innovation at Adobe. All right. Let's go. Okay, so Connie, why don't we start with you?
Okay.
Lots of times people try to implement AI in their organizations. It doesn't work, and they think it's a technical problem, but it's actually a human problem. Explain why that sometimes happens and what organizations should do.
Well, I think that always happens when there's a problem.
Always?
With AI, because because as long as we continue to have people in implementing AI and using AI, I think there's always going to be some kind of people aspect to it. So why does it happen that it breaks down, though? I think there's a long list, longer than I can give today. But I do think the theme of this conversation about trust is a big part of it. People are feeling that their employers are not involving them in decisions, that they don't know what's going to happen to their jobs. And more importantly, they're also starting to lose trust that I see between employees based on how AI is being implemented. So I think in terms of what to do about it, I think the first thing is companies should start thinking about the people issues right from the beginning. And I don't know how many companies are doing that as much now. When I talk to heads of HR, oftentimes there's still a silo about who's making the tech decisions, and then they sort of throw it over to them to help implement it. And I think we need to integrate those kinds of people-oriented decisions right from the very beginning.
Wait, so HR should be implemented in tech implementation?
AI should be involved in tech design.
HR should be involved in AI implementation.
Yes.
Okay.
maybe we're talking about different things. I mean, in
No,
the
no,
sense
no.
of-
I'm just making sure.
Yeah. Yes. They should have I think, be able to speak for the employees and help cultivate the right implementation plan.
Stephen, you look like you're leaning forward and want to jump in and either agree or disagree.
I am fully agreeing with that. There is so much fear about job loss. So I think HR needs to be there to set appropriate expectations. But also people need to change the way they work with each other because we have AI. A big fallacy I'm seeing in companies is that they treat AI like a tool. And we're going to swap one tool for another. We're going to swap a steam-powered machine for an electric machine. And, that's nice, but that doesn't give you the assembly line. The assembly line comes from the system thinking. How do people work with each other in a different way? And HR is one of the organizations. Certainly there need to be others at the table too, but they need to think about how do human relations change.
So, Chris, you want to jump in here? You implemented AI. Everybody at Adobe uses AI 96% of the day. Is that correct?
Maybe even more.
Yeah. So how did you get to that point? Because a lot of organizations aren't at that point.
This is the fundamental question. It's the greatest feature is trust. And so there's a responsibility on the individual, on the product creator, on the business and society and nation states. The complexity comes in. There's different definitions of trust across that spectrum, as well as across the different verticals. And so that is where each and every use case has a different definition and framework for the trust that gets implemented.
Can we narrow down what we mean by trust? Like trust that this machine is not going to take my job, trust that my organization is implementing it the right way, trust that we can understand the outputs accurately? What kind of trust are we talking about?
I would even go a couple layers down. How was the model trained? And can you trust that that data was accessible, it was owned, it's unbiased? Then the next layer is, can you trust that the output is accurate? And then you go into the different use cases across the what we call content supply chain.
Okay, but let's stay then for a second, because how could anybody possibly trust that they know what these models were trained on when it was all stolen and hidden? Like at least one layer, you can't possibly have trust. And yet you at Adobe, like you said, it's like 90% of the people are using it all day.
Yeah, great point. We're quite proud at Adobe. About 4 or 5 years ago, we started getting into generative AI, right? In the late 2018s, 19s, or where the language transformers, the LLM started to come into play. So we had to get in. We had what we didn't know at the time, the superpower of a data set, that being Adobe stock, comprised of 600 to 700 million assets across video, images, video, audio, and so on. So we trained off of data that we knew, and then we went in and did fine-tuning that we were happy with the output. So it can be done that you own the data, and you can then go in and refine the output to the threshold of quality that you want.
Connie, do you agree with that framework of trust, that you need trust at all those levels? And if so, kind of which is the most important level that people underappreciate?
Well, I mean, certainly I do think we should think about the type of trust and the target of trust. So the type of trust, there are many different kinds. In my world, when I think about interpersonal trust, we talk about sort of the basic level, which is just a calculus trust, so sort of knowing the rules and knowing the system, which would also apply to AI. Like if I trust the algorithm, then I have a basic level of trust. The next level up, though, would be like a knowledge and personal experience-based trust by this is predictable. This person is predictable, or this AI is predictable. So that's a little bit better because now I actually know it myself. And then the highest level would be identification trust, where you actually start to kind of blend with a target, whether it's an AI chatbot or with another human being, saying, well, now I really sort of trust them to think like me or behave like me or work like me. So, we have to think about the layers of trust, and then also, well, who are we talking about? Are we talking about the AI, the leaders, the fellow employees, the customers, the designers of our tech? I mean, there's lots of different targets, but I think you can think about it in terms of the types first.
Steve, can I give a theory to you? So one theory that I've heard on AI is that in basically every organization, the executives want to do it, right? Because they want the efficiency. They're told by the board that they need to do it. They need to grow. They've used the tools. They've met lots of people in the AI industry. They're psyched, right? And then as you move down different layers of the organization, people are like, what the hell is this thing, right? It's like, A, it's going to take my job. B, it's, dishonest. And C, the organization's implementing it all wrong. So for an organization to implement AI efficiently, you can't just have the CEO say, damn it, I'll use the damn tools. You need like influencers in the organization. You need like people at every level who are giving examples. Is that an accurate and good theory, or is that a wrong theory?
So I think you do need champions in different departments to lead the change, but there also needs to be a business reason to adopt AI. It can't just be use this technology, but here's a business objective. Maybe it's radical customization for a customer, or we're going to schedule the nurses in a much more efficient manner, and the only possible way of doing that would be AI. Then people have to turn to the tool to accomplish the objective. But then critically, they don't just think about the tool in isolation, because that's going to get you into a lot of trouble. But they're thinking about the whole system of work that it fits into.
Chris, does this sound right to you?
Completely agree. And I think maybe just to double click on that point, it does have to map to the business strategy and objective. I think the tension challenge there is, are you applying the AI to a legacy strategy, even though it's new, or a completely reinvention strategy? An example is in about 100 years ago, when steel first became industrialized, it took about 50 years for the architects to take the steel and leverage the capabilities. At that time, bridges were all wood, and they kept on building the bridges the same way using steel. And I think much like that, we're in the same dynamic, that we're trying to achieve things that are no longer really relevant or as valuable as.
Okay, wait. So tell me how how did Adobe solve that problem?
Yeah, I think we're a textbook example of, we went from the box software to cloud. We then went to generative AI. And the first instance, this is a metaphor across industries, we injected AI into existing products. The next layer was then AI first platforms. That was a compilation, or is a compilation, of all of our legacy application and flagship applications. And now we're moving to the next phase of agentic. And even our thinking has somewhat changed. Quite often you may have seen these slides at events where it goes, we started out with predictive AI, then generative AI, then robotic. And that shows a linear progression. The reality is it's a tech stack that organizations have to layer onto. So I would offer, inject where you currently are, and then start to layer on the technology for a new AI first strategy.
So inject some steel in the bridges, but also figure out how to build new bridges?
Exactly. Love it.
Connie, you've written and studied the question of loneliness and the question of like how colleagues relate to each other. In an age of AI, so let's say an organization does implement AI, and now everybody's like running their agents and they're doing their PowerPoints together, and ideally they're not doing work slop, but they're doing like real stuff. How do you maintain the social cohesion that an organization needs?
I'm glad you asked, because this is definitely some new research that I have coming out soon that I think is really important for people to understand, which is going back to this idea of who we're trusting. If we're trying to create closer connections and avoid loneliness, which is a huge problem. Or we did a recent study of 1,000 people who all use AI on average daily at work, and half of them were lonely. So I'm not saying that's causal, but we're seeing there's a loneliness.
Wait, versus the people who don't use AI, what % are lonely?
No, this study was only people, we only sorted it for people who are using AI regularly. That's who we wanted to talk to. Other studies have looked at people more broadly, and they find about the same ratio. So, so the question then was, well, how is AI interacting with that sense of loneliness? And, one of the key things that's coming up is that people are going to AI for help, for all kinds of help, not just helping me do my job, but they're actually going to AI for help in things you would think only a person could do, like companionship, having a friend at work, or like having a therapeutic supporter to help you manage the emotions and stress of your job, as well as things like career advice and also just sort of helping me build my personal skills and viability. And so this is all amazing, and people are really happy to have this opportunity through AI. But what's happening is they're not going to each other for that. And when we lose those ways of giving and receiving help with each other, that we lose a really important pathway to trust. Because that's how, one of the measures we give of if people are lonely or not is, do you have enough people at work who would have your back if you needed support? And what we're seeing is that, as more people rely on AI, they may have fewer people who have their back.
But more agents.
But more agents.
Steve, do you want to jump in on that?
I would like to jump in. So, agree. Obviously, that's a concern. There are many changes in how people are going to relate to each other, which could have some downsides. So, for instance, sales can now create its own marketing collateral. But how does marketing feel about that? And
They can make
where
their
are
own
the
sales
boundaries
data.
going to be? Sorry?
I mean, they can make their own sales material too, right? I mean, this is the weird thing about organizations now.
Right. So, in a way, that's good, right? It creates a lot more rapid action and customization, but it might disempower some other people. On the flip side, marketing now has more visibility into what sales is doing because AI is making unstructured data structured. And so you have a lot more opportunity to meddle too. So where are we going to be on that spectrum from meddling to just going and doing wild and crazy stuff? These are things that in time are going to get worked out, but because AI adoption is happening on such an accelerated schedule, or should be more because we're doing this conference, that we have to sort this out quickly and ask the hard questions.
All right. So why do you explain what an octopus organization is and one theory for this? If anybody on this panel can explain an octopus organization, you're the man.
Yes. Yes. So look, the octopus is remarkable for many things. It's hyper adaptable, but for AI, it is such an apt analogy because an octopus actually has 9 brains. It has a central brain and then one in each of its arms. 2/3 of the neural tissue in an octopus is not in its central brain. So it thinks in an entirely alien way to us humans, but in a very appropriate way when thinking about how AI creates distributed intelligence around an organization. Now, what this enables an octopus to do is to react and sense much more locally. So one arm can be opening up a clam, another is exploring a cave, and they can act quasi-independently, even communicating with each other in a de-siloed sort of way without involving the central brain. So finally, look, after 40 years, we've been talking about devolving authority and breaking down silos, and people aren't doing it because it's been hard. Now AI makes it a lot easier.
Can I ask you a question about the physiology of an octopus? What happens if one arm is like eating the clam and it's like really excited, like good clam, and like it knows that there's like a lot of clams, right? And the other arm is like in a cave and suddenly there's a shark and shark bites arm. So you have one arm that's like, let's stay here and eat the clam, and the other like, let's get the hell out of here. But there's no central brain to decide what happens.
So one of the best things about my job is I get to watch a lot of videos on YouTube of octopuses. And you will see how they're just doing their things and then something happens and bang, all the arms are in coordination. So the central brain can override, just like a corporate headquarters can override. But it's an exception.
So an octopus organization, you're decentralizing and devolving authority. You're letting organizations have more power because like marketing can do some sales can do some marketing. They're kind of each maybe competing with each other in like their little clam caves. But then if something goes really wrong,
right,
HR and the CEO jump in action.
That's right. So it's a much more coordinated, fast-moving, adaptable way of organizing.
Chris, can we go, the octopus organization is amazing, and I want to talk more about the octopus organization, but I also want to stay on this loneliness point because that was super interesting. You guys are using AI nonstop. Are you super lonely at Adobe?
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to see the research. A counterpoint to that would be was chatting with your wonderful camera crew before the event, and they're doing real-time editing. I would offer that is phenomenally complex, a phenomenal example of how AI can provide value in real time. I remember when I got in the business, I would stay up all night, and so I felt lonely when I was editing 2, 3 in the morning. So there is a sense of empowerment as well. Maybe some of that loneliness is coming from some additional factors, but I haven't seen the research. So I guess our premise is it's a great empowerment amplifier.
Are there any baleful effects of AI at Adobe, or is it all just like sunshine and roses over there?
I think, and you can relate to this speed. I think in your book, congratulations, one of your lines is simplicity leads to complexity. So we have a very clear strategy. The tech is moving so quickly on a very fundamental level, even from a product, and we've got our finger on the pulse. We're pivoting very quickly. And so I think from an organizational standpoint, we've seen that these very nimble teams of 6 to 8 people come together, they swarm a project, and then they move on to the next challenge and opportunity. So I would say speed and agility. We've been talking about it for years, but it is real now.
Most of my book is about pain and suffering, but I'm glad that you. Stevie, will you? We only have a couple minutes left. So why don't we end? We'll go to you and then to Connie. How exactly should the folks in this room who run these big, product organizations, tech organizations, how should they implement the octopi? Octopuses or octopi?
It is octopuses. It is a Greek term, not a Latin term.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. God, stuff. Someone just say that's right. God bless the audience. Okay. How should they implement the octopuses?
So you got to do it in stages. You can't do the whole transformation at once. You'll die. Keep doing your pilots. That's nice, right? It gets people comfortable. But then choose a couple, maybe a half dozen workflows where you can really deconstruct what's been going on, not at the level of person and job description, but at the underlying task. Microsoft calls these work charts as opposed to org charts. And then reconstruct how you might do things in a very different way with the guiding principles of devolution of authority and de-siloing. AI makes that possible in ways that you could just never do before.
All right. And Connie, for all these folks who don't want their employees to be lonely and sad.
Well, the first thing I would do is really start paying attention and measuring what's going on from a social and psychological standpoint with your employees differently than you've done before. It's not just about productivity and engagement, but really about their experience with each other and their perceptions. I loved your comment too about sort of territory grabs and things like that too are also going to affect interpersonal dynamics. And then to Chris's point, I'm not also saying that this is all doom and gloom. I mean, I would say let's use the tool, let's harness it towards better social connections for humans. We can embed positive friction, for example, where say you have something you're doing and you want to ask your AI to explain it to you. AI can come back to you and say, hey, Priya is an expert on this subject. Do you want me to connect you to her? And start, using it to also get to know your fellow employees better so that you're always using both AI and humans in the end.
All right. Perfect. AI and humans in the end. Thank you so much. What a wonderful panel. Thanks for being on stage. All right. Joining us now is Ruchir Puri, Chief Scientist at IBM Research. Has had an amazing long career. We've been talking about it for a little while at IBM. He's going to talk about AI agents that are self-aware. He's going to talk about how to implement them. He's going to talk about some of what's going on at IBM. Ruchir, how are you?
Doing well, Nick.
Great. So this year was supposed to be the year of the agents. Everybody talked about it last January. When are agents actually going to come? What do they mean and what needs to happen?
So first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me here, Nick, and thanks for giving your time as well. I think the rollout of agents have started. The good question will be, when will they really become sort of among one of us? They're digital agents and they're human agents. We are on that journey. For simple tasks, I would say we are there. For complex tasks, we are much further away. And I'll just give a very quick example for the world of software engineering. I think we already have agents rolled out. Now, they're not as sophisticated as a power user, but they're definitely as sophisticated as your newbie software engineer who just joined and can help them tremendously. So in some ways, they are here. In other ways, they are on a journey.
Wait, let's talk about what agents currently work for you. So like right now, you're on stage, you're talking to me, you're disconnected from your devices. What are Ruchir's agents doing right now?
So Ruchir's agents right now are certainly debugging my software. In general, they are actually trying to understand the COBOL program that was written 50 years back, which Ruchir will have a hard time understanding because I didn't write that application. And the person who wrote it is long gone.
Where is this COBOL application that was written 50 years ago? Where is it running?
Likely the credit card you swiped, potentially for your buying your coffee, had that COBOL code running actually. 84% of financial transactions made in this world are made on a back-end system, which a snippet of it may have gone through that COBOL program. Just to be fair, there's nothing wrong with COBOL program. There's nothing wrong with that language per se. Grace Hopper invented that language. But it's just these systems become so complex.
Wait. Are the calculations also done on an abacus? I mean, like, that's like some old stuff, right? I mean, I don't want to divert this too much. Your credit card transactions run on code to some degree that was written 50 years ago, and you're trying to debug it now with your agents?
So I think let me say it this way. So I'm going to infuse some reality into this discussion. Systems build on each other. Rarely is that you will say that I'm just going to kill all of this. I'm going to start from scratch because the world continues to move. So yes, there are a lot of systems that are written from, I would say, new applications are written in new technologies, but older applications, part of which continue to run, and they are modernized, by the way. These are not systems of your grandma era. They've been modernized. COBOL has a development ecosystem, so think of it as a software development lifecycle, which is modern. And because the language is old, it presents its own set of challenges. So what I'm saying is that systems in this world, engineering systems, continue to build on each other. Do you drive a car on a bridge that was built 110 years back? No. You're in New York.
Why? Not only that, I go in tunnels that were built in subways that were built 100 years ago.
I'm sure probably you're scared, but you still drive through.
I'm less scared of the bridge than the other drivers. It's true. So, okay. Back to your agents. So you've got your agents, they're looking into this old COBOL code, they're debugging. What else are they doing? Do you named them? Do you have personalities for your agents?
Yeah, I think we are far away from the world where we have started assigning them personalities as such. I like them to be useful, not have personalities and attitudes. That's the point I'm trying to get away from. That's the benefit of machines. They don't have attitude. So I'm trying to get to a world which is hopefully
I did once talk to someone who was building a large language model at one of the big frontier labs, and they had trained, this was early on, and they had trained their large language model on Reddit data, and they were asking their large language models to do all kinds of stuff. It went on strike. They literally went on strike. Like they had learned that's what you're supposed to do when your bosses demand too much. All right, okay, so you have agents, they don't have personalities, they're running in the background, they're doing code. What comes next? Like what is the thing that the folks in the room should be thinking about that you've seen?
There are two aspects I would hope and I would encourage everyone to think about. One is these set of technologies are amazingly powerful, and there are useful tasks all over your organization that you should think about sort of automating, if I may say it that way. Because there's tremendous amount of mundane work, if I may say, glue that falls in between here and there, which can be automated, and we should take this opportunity to make our sort of daily work more fulfilling and not just mundane work, actually. The second level is, I believe for the hype to become true, we will need to rethink many of our processes as well. What I'll call not plus AI, but AI plus, which is just reimagine if AI is given to you, what will that process and capability and workflow look like? And we are far away from that era. That's why I believe all the hype that is there may become true, but it's going to require a change in our imagination and thinking of rethinking how work should be done, not how work is done, and I'm just automating pieces of it. You'll only get so far, actually.
This leads to, I think, one of the most interesting questions. If I were to look at the next 10 years is, will the winners be the legacy companies that use AI the best? Or will the winners be AI native startups that disrupt all the legacy companies? Obviously, a legacy company that doesn't use AI, I think, is cooked. But which one will it be? And when you say that, it makes me kind of think that maybe the future belongs to AI native startups that are able to entirely reimagine things. How does IBM think about this process?
So I would say the winners will be, I would say, in between somewhere. And the reason I'm saying this is, if there are companies at IBM, the way we like to think about it is because legacy companies which have horizontal reach, actually, the benefit of legacy companies is a horizontal platform. And if you have a horizontal platform, and if you are agile enough or part of your teams are agile enough, whether it is through M&A or other activities, organic, then you can roll out technologies which are horizontal reach, actually. A startup may take a much longer time to get to that point. So that's why I believe the success, in ideal scenario, it will be large companies that are able to leverage the opportunity and leverage their reach as well. Now, that combination doesn't occur often because legacy slows you down. It's classic innovator's dilemma. It slows you down, actually. But the winners will be the combination of the two, whether it happens through M&A, whether that happens through organic, or whether that happens through, in very selective cases, startups being able to reach that massive potential. It's hard. It's very, very hard. Having said that, it's hard on the left-hand side as well. Large companies able to totally reinvent themselves, and the reality is in between the combination of the two.
So that will be a good world, not only for IBM, but for all of IBM's clients too. Let me ask you a question about agents. So right now you have an agent and it goes out in the world and it does its stuff. And basically you give it a bunch of code and it does what it does. It comes back. There's some handoff to humans. At what point will we reach agents that can continuously learn and just get smarter and smarter? Because that changes the game, right?
Yeah, I think there are three things that I fundamentally believe, and that is sort of one of them, and hopefully we'll talk about the other two as well, which we'll call, let's say, self-improving agents. We are nowhere close, actually. I think there's some fundamental human traits, I would say, that make us human. And I would like to believe self-improvement is one of them. Most humans self-improve, or at least good ones self-improve. That is a fundamental research topic currently in academia on how to build AI models that can learn from experience and that can self-improve as well. Fundamental to that is actually a question, which is again a very hot academic and research topic in AI, which is related to knowing what you don't know. That's like, to humans, if I am saying something which I know is not correct, I know it. You may be lying with a straight face. You know it. Or most sane people know it, unless they are hallucinating themselves, like models, that they know it. Unlike models, I would say, in this case, models don't know what they don't know. So, like, how many times have you encountered a model that tells you, I don't know? I would argue almost never. It always answers you, actually very confidently sometimes, and sometimes it may be a little bit in doubt, but it never says, I don't know. I would say knowing what you know is a retrieval. It was in your memory, you retrieve it. Knowing what you don't know is intelligence. And I think we are far away from that point where sort of how do these models calibrate their uncertainty, which leads to self-learning. What do you know? What you need to know is what you don't know, actually. So,
all right. So you think understanding what you don't know is an essential ingredient of the self-learning process?
Because you need to go and learn that part. I don't know this, so I need to go and improve on that. Just deciding what do you need to improve on is obviously rests upon, having a realization of what you don't know. The other part is obviously through the process in which you are deployed, somebody else is giving you feedback. Either that feedback is external or that feedback is...
But how hard of a problem? I mean, I can make ChatGPT less, I can make any AI model less overconfident if I just put it in the prompt, right? If you don't have 100% certainty in the answer, just tell me you don't know, right? You can, through proper prompting, you can make your model more self-aware of what it knows and what it doesn't know. How hard a problem is it to solve?
I think the uncertainty, obviously, there's a probability number. That probability is contextual as well. If the task was very hard, you can't just put thresholding on it. Because if the task was very, very hard, and if you had a reasonable probability, that may be very good, actually, because I gave you a very hard task. So it all relates to the task, the context, the probabilities that you have, and that's a fairly complex field overall. Yeah. It's not as simple as I can say 0.5 threshold if you're above it or below it. Generalizing that concept is a very hard task.
All right, so let's go back a step. You said there are three really important things. The first is continuous learning. What are the other two really important things for a positive agentic future?
So I think the first one is this topic on continuous learning / self-improving The second one is, which we already discussed, related to it, is knowing what you don't know. And like, in my mind, at least, we will live in a world where humans and agents will be coexisting almost forever, actually. Because if I have an agent who I can sort of totally trust, if I may say, I can give them a job and they can keep running and they're writing code or doing COBOL or whatever they're doing. But if an agent always came back to me and said, can you look at it? Can you look at it all the time? Like, I might as well do the job. I don't need you to do, if I need to review something all the time. So they say, I don't know. Can you look at it? Like, that's useless almost. If they never ask me anything, that's freaking dangerous, because they never ask me, like, why didn't you ask me this? Like, you did it, you didn't ask me this, now it's wrong.
This is super interesting.
So the reality will be in between. And when should an agent ask me a question? When should an agent ask me to review things? When should an agent ask me, just give me information. I did this. Was this okay, actually? So that boundary is the one which is the human agent boundary, which is the essence of how agents will exist in our society. And that relates to the point of really knowing what you don't know point, actually.
All right, wait, so let me go back. So the three most important things in order to have a successful agentic workforce or successful agentic implementation and organization are agents that can continuously learn and self-improve, agents that understand what they know and what they don't know, and agents that calibrate the proper number of times to go back to the humans and the human handoff. And presumably, in category 3, you're also thinking of agents that control other agents. Like, basically, when do you bump something up a level and knowing the proper amount to do that?
Absolutely, because these are sort of, in some ways, agents with an agency. And it's almost like humans. I'm going to pull in my manager. Like, when do you do that, actually? You can't say for everything, I'm going to pull in your manager, because your manager is sure to fire you. Because if you're going to pull me in all the time, like, I don't need you, actually. So I absolutely right, actually.
Okay, so is IBM working to solve these three issues?
Absolutely it is.
And what is the hardest one of them?
I would really say sort of the two fundamental ones are the one on self-improvement and knowing what you don't know, actually. Are two fundamental ones, because the third one is sort of in some ways related to the second.
What are the other interesting ways that human intelligence differs from agentic intelligence? Like, we can all see the obvious things, right? Like, agents can work 24/7. They can sort of read all the information in the world. Humans don't BS. What are the other interesting differences in intelligence as someone who's been working in this field for 30 years? What do you think?
I think the most fundamental one, I would say, and this goes back to, it's almost my experience 10 years back. We'll talk a lot about responsible AI and bias in AI, and it's certainly very important and a very hot topic. Having said that, I take the other point of view in this. I've worked in this field for almost like more than a decade, actually. The benefit of machines is you can audit their bias, and potentially you can debias them. Try debiasing a human, because people are who they are from their experience. I believe the benefit of machines is that you can actually deploy them, you can continuously audit them all the time, because the outputs are digitally connected. And then you can also have technologies which help you, unbias or mitigate the bias as well, which differs fundamentally from how we humans operate. And you're right, yes, we have processes around it, but they are not quote unquote sort of digitized processes, and our outputs are not hooked to a digital machine all the time. So the society can be better overall. And in other ways, of course, humans differ from machines. I believe, I'm going to say sort of 3 factors into this. Everybody talks about general intelligence. I'm not a fan of the word, officially so. I like the word useful intelligence rather than general intelligence. But intelligence is comprised of 3 Qs. Everybody loves one of the Qs, which is IQ, which I believe machines will do amazingly at, actually. They're already doing incredible, and they'll continue to do better. Second Q, also everybody knows EQ, which obviously emotional quotient, which machines don't have. And I think that is what makes us human. The third Q, which I believe is incredibly important for success of most leaders and in this room and most humans is what I call RQ, which is relationship quotient. So intelligence is comprised of IQ, EQ, and RQ. How good you are at sort of building your network, building your relationship, which does relate to EQ as well. I believe as we move forward in the future, machines will supersede us on IQ to a large extent. What will continue to differentiate us is this capability of empathy, emotions, and our ability to build relationships and nurture relationships, which we are far away from in the world in machines. So I do not believe even if we reach this level of what is being called general intelligence, which will be anywhere close to human intelligence, because human intelligence is much more complex.
Well, you don't think machines will be able to simulate empathy and will be able to simulate emotional connection? I mean, we already have like psychotherapist bots that people develop deep relationships with. They're going to be whole social networks that are going to be built on simulating social relationships and sort of mapping how humans respond to each other and just copying that.
Yeah, I think there is a difference between just copying things and imagine the power of a hug. You don't talk. There's no tokens produced. Like nothing. Just give a hug.
You mean like a hug between husband and wife or like a man hug at a bar?
Either way. Like, I'm not going to get into that debate. Having said that, like sometimes my wife will want to hug me and say, like, I think I'm going to get a beating or something actually. So I would really say, like, irrespective of whatever the hug is, like you are troubled and somebody says, let me give you a hug. Like, that, again, empathy is a lot more about those things that are unsaid as well, actually. Looking somebody in the eye. Like, okay, you can reproduce that with tokens. Yeah, try it. Looking somebody in the eye, actually. I think we are far away from that word. We are underappreciating that word of empathy in humans, which is a significant part of what makes us intelligent overall. Most CEOs have reasonable IQs. They have incredible EQs, actually. That's what makes them successful. And we are trying to do too much on the IQ part, and we are leaving this part on the EQ and the RQ part, which makes most actually leaders and CEOs of the world successful.
Well, showing my low EQ as a CEO, that's the end of our session, Ruchir. But it was a real pleasure talking with you. All right. We are now going to talk with Rebecca Hinds, who's the head of thought leadership at Glean. Welcome.
Thank you, Nick.
This is really fun. Why don't we start by you very quickly going through your 5-part theory of what organizations need to do to use AI effectively?
Sure. And I think every week we do more research and talk with our customers and others. The list grows and grows. So maybe I'll
So it's now 6?
I mean, it depends how you slice and dice it, but it continually grows. So maybe I'll start with 1 or 2 and we can...
Okay, start with 1 or 2 and then I'll pick them apart.
So the first is, and probably not surprising to anyone in this room, just how psychological this transition is and how important it is to focus on human mindset, human psychology. And one of my favorite pieces of research that I've done over several quarters and years, we ask people, what would you compare AI to? What is that mental model that you're thinking about in terms of that comparison point? Most people say it's a tool, right? AI is fundamentally a tool to them. There's a small group, a group of just 9% of employees, but we see it grow and grow, that say to them, AI is a teammate. And what's fascinating is this group that has this mental model of a teammate, they're interacting with the technology in fundamentally different ways than the people who are thinking about it as a tool. They're not giving up after the first try. They're not thinking about it really transactionally. They're pushing it to think deeper. They're not just asking, what can it do for me? They're asking, what can I do with the technology?
So wait, it's 9% teammate, and then is it 91% tool, or is it like 80% tool, 11% enemy?
So it's about 53% tool. We ask multiple different analogies, consultants, co-pilots.
Right.
But
Invader.
The sort of bit flip in terms of the productivity gain.
So interesting.
When you're having this.
So once you realize that it's there, once you start to think of it as a teammate, then things start to go much better.
Yes. Okay. Much better for your productivity.
Okay. So that's number one. So if organizations can do that, and if they can implement that attitude, that gets them to use AI more effectively. Okay, that makes good sense. So how do you get it from 9% to 20%?
I think that brings us to another one of the shifts, and that is the importance of pairing top-down change with bottom-up momentum. We see in so many organizations this over-indexing on top-down change, mandates, memos telling employees to use AI or else. What we see in these successful organizations is they're taking a bifurcated strategy. They're saying, yes, policy, absolutely important. Principles, absolutely important. The executives using the technology, really important. But we're also figuring out, how do we activate that bottom-up change? How do we find the champions, the influencers in our organizations? How do we make sure every department is using the technology? How do we have a horizontal platform that's low code, no code, so people are experimenting and learning how to use the technology? And it's very much a two-way strategy.
Is like, let's say the CEO is super excited about AI and like goes around and interviews interesting people at AI conferences and like does a daily video on AI. Is that counterproductive to organizational adaptation of AI, or is it just kind of useless?
So two things matter. One, they need to be using the AI in their day-to-day work. So we see a lot of success with organizations where the CEO will turn around their computer screen and show the use of AI in daily practice. The rhythm of this matters incredibly much. So we know that absolutely it needs to happen at the top level, it needs to happen at the managerial level, and it needs to happen at the individual contributor level. So one of my favorite Fortune 50 companies, they've said, okay, how do we inject AI at the C-suite so that every C-level meeting has a 5-minute ritual where they're showing how they're using AI, that then trickles down to every, leadership level at the middle and every individual contributor meeting with the manager. There's that rhythm of AI experimentation, AI learning, so that it is truly embedded in the organization.
What else can you do to make sure a mutual friend of ours that works at a company where employees are evaluated at the end of the year as to whether they used AI or not, right? And they look at the amount of time that people have spent during AI. Is that a good idea?
No. So measurement is important. And we see, the number of, and we were talking at lunch, the number of organizations right now that are tracking how many times people are clicking the tool as a measure of productivity or AI adoption or AI success, it's staggering. And some are going so far as to sending out weekly updates to employees, stack ranking them in terms of how much they click the tool.
Really?
Multiple Fortune 50 companies. Wow. And it creates these perverse incentives where we already see high levels of productivity theater within our organizations, where we schedule meetings, we send status updates just to show we're productive rather than being productive. We're seeing AI theater in organizations where people, especially if there's that pressure from the top that isn't trickling down, they're clicking the tool because they think that's what they're supposed to do, regardless of whether they're actually finding the technology useful. Now, measuring is important, and part of every strategy should involve some sort of telemetry data where you're looking at how employees are using the tool, but it can't be just based on clicks of the tool.
All right, so we're not going to do companies should not, do KPIs based on clicks of the tool. What should they do to implement it at the third level of the organization? The CEO turning around the screen is fine. Like, direct reports will see it. Maybe the direct reports turn around their screen, but you're not really going to be able to implement AI in a 1,000-person organization doing that. So what have you seen that really works?
So it's really important to have people within each function who have the responsibility of identifying use cases within that function. We have a team at Glean that we call the Glean on Glean team, where there's a member of every single function that is responsible for identifying AI use cases and starting with the most mundane, routine, drudgery type work that every function does on a day-to-day basis, and documenting that, and then figuring out, okay, where does AI fit in the process? We do that with our customers as well. We have an AI outcomes team where as soon as they're paired with a customer, they're thinking about, okay, it's not just a rollout of the technology. How do we think about the metrics, the measurement, the business outcomes that are going to drive this technology forward?
All right, so that's number 2. Let's go to number 3. What is number 3?
So number 3, right now, we're seeing this technology treated as a personal productivity tool, right? How can I use the technology to extract the most value from my employees, get them to do more with less? The successful organizations are thinking at a different level. Productivity is absolutely important, but they're saying, okay, how do I use this technology to increase the effectiveness at the team and organizational level? Because what we know is so often we create these situations, sometimes they're called the tragedy of the commons, where we're over-indexing on individual productivity. An individual is using AI to delegate all their work to other humans, sometimes AI, and they're creating this flood of AI slop, AI overload that impacts the organization in a really negative way. So individually, they might look productive, but they've just made things worse for the team and organization. And so successful organizations are thinking about, okay, what are the metrics? What are the processes? What are the norms that are going to ensure that this technology is benefiting the team and organization, not at the individual level? One of the most common questions I get from executives is they know their employees are using the tool. They see roughly similar quality of work before and after. They're not sure where the time savings is going. And if you over-index on the individual productivity level, employees are taking that productivity gain to themselves rather than giving it back to the organization. A bigger part is the fact that we're not thinking about the coordination cost of this technology. And very easily, if we're giving individual employees productivity tools, their first gut reaction is going to be to use it to boost their own productivity, where often you then don't see the trickle-down effects to coordination when it comes to merging the work together.
Oh, I see. So wait, so it's kind of 3 things, right? It's A, they're using the tools to make work slop, which doesn't help, right? They're taking a bullet point, they're turning it into a PowerPoint, which then their employee turns back into a bullet point, right? And then 2, if they're freeing up time, they're using it to check Instagram. But 3, even to the extent they're getting benefits, they're just kind of keeping the benefits to themselves. They're not sharing the tools and the ideas through their work group because they want to be ahead of their teammates, right? They want to show that they can, like, they don't want to share with the other sales reps because, they'll get more deals if they can use AI better than the others, right? So there's that's the tragedy of the commons problem.
Yes, exactly. Wow. And one of the other, so I heard this story where it was one of the largest banks in the world. They came in to the board and said, we have a 50% increase in productivity within this organization. And they double clicked and said, okay, show me where these productivity gains are coming from. And yes, they were getting some productivity gains with the tools they were using, but they were using even more time sitting in meetings, deciding what to do with the productivity gains and the time they had gotten back. And I think that's where we see, it's very easy to treat this technology as a short-term productivity tool and not think about the overall systems thinking is so important when we think about the implementation of this.
Okay, great. I'm convinced. So now how do you do that, right? We got a bunch of product leaders, organizational leaders, their sales team, they're not sharing their tools and they're checking Instagram a lot. So what do they do? Not our sales team. What should they do?
It's really important to have that horizontal AI platform across your organization. Often we see technologies, and we're seeing it with AI, these tools are invested in silos and implemented in silos where you have the engineering team doing something completely different from the rest of the organization. Absolutely, we need purpose-built AI tools for specific functions within our organization, but absolutely, we also need a horizontal layer for those cross-functional workflows. When we think about things like meetings, performance reviews, all the messy workflows that involve multiple different groups, there absolutely needs to be a tool and then a platform and then a strategy to ensure that everyone is using this technology.
All right, so that's number 3, right? So, okay, now let's go to number 4.
So 4 is around something that is called the toggle tax. Everyone has experienced it, this tax that we incur as we toggle between tools, apps, technology. It's a massive cost within our organization, and it has been for years and years. We know that in Fortune 500 companies, employees can switch between tools up to 1,200 times, sometimes more, each day. And if they become distracted as
Wait, how is that number possible, right? So you're there, you're there 60 minutes, 8 hours, that's 480 minutes. That's like 2.5 times a minute. You're just going like Workday, Slack, Gmail, Gmail, Slack, Workday.
So think of how many times, and this is within a Fortune 500 company. This research was done. So it's definitely enterprise technologies. But think about how many tabs you switch, how many apps you switch, how many times you toggle Slack to email. It's massive within large organizations.
Wow, 1,200. Okay, anyway, so yes, so 1,200 times a day. Great. So we don't want that. We want less than that, right? So how do we get there? We want it down to 1,100. That's where the successful companies are.
Right. And so what needs to happen is, as you think about AI, it can't be something that's adding to the toggle tax.
Right.
And that's what we see right now. We measure something called digital exhaustion with one of our great research partners. And we see this digital exhaustion, this exhaustion as a result of the technologies we feel we need to use at work continues to rise. And so the key with AI is, how do you use the technology to minimize this toggle tax? How do you ensure that employees don't need to go to another app, another tool to use the technology, and similarly don't have to go to another app, another platform to learn how to use the technology? It very much needs to be in the flow of work.
Wait, so the idea, I mean, I guess this is Glean's business model, right? Is build an AI app that feeds in your Slack, your Workday, and everything else into this one app where you can stay in it, and then you can be more efficient. You can pull information from all these other things and not have to be switching back and forth.
And that makes AI incredibly powerful, right? Because we see that so often AI doesn't have the organizational context such that you might be gleaning information from one tool, but you're not understanding the complete ecosystem of how work is happening, and you're getting an incomplete picture. And I think that's another reason why we're seeing these rollouts fail, is because there's a lack of understanding of the organizational context. That this is a really serious conversation, that security absolutely needs to come first, and respecting permissions, making sure authentication is strong, making sure you're investing in a tool that has security embedded from day one is really important, especially as we move toward the world of agents.
Totally. I mean, and also like not just preventing hackers, but like if you're feeding Slack into an AI tool and you haven't done the permissioning right, and you can just sort of be like, hey, what does Nick normally Slack Scott about employee relations, and anyone in the company can access that? That's a problem. So you need to prevent that.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, cool. Number 5.
Yep. So 5 is around the org chart. And this is one of the future forward, things we're going to see in our organization, is how org charts are going to evolve as a result of this technology. We know that the hierarchy, the org chart, is decades old. It probably needs rewiring for the AI age. We're not yet seeing many organizations start to think about how do we fundamentally rethink our org chart, but we are seeing some organizations become really thoughtful about, okay, how do we make the connections between departments more flexible? How do we ensure there's really strong collaboration between HR and IT, for example? Super important. And some are starting to think, okay, how do we think more flexibly about how we design teams and structures to better leverage the technology, which, if you design it right, doesn't really care about organizational silos.
Do you like octopuses?
I love the model, right? Because we know that work needs to become more flexible as we leverage the technology to create these global optimums and not just these local optimums within our team.
All right, so explain this org question. That it comes up all the time. Everybody sort of sees, right, that product managers are learning to code, engineers are learning to do product, designers are learning to do both, product and engineers are learning to do design. Everybody's kind of doing data science, right? Everybody now with AI can do a little bit of everybody else's job, right? And so there's this general hypothesis I hear that, well, this is going to lead to much flatter structures, right? But no one actually has done that, right? Like no one has moved, as far as I can tell, to a much flatter structure. Are we actually going there?
We're definitely seeing a flattening, and it's the fad of the moment right now to figure out how to use this technology to flatten the org chart. Very few companies are doing it well, and it's really important, again, to understand, okay, what is the impact of this technology? How does it impact different roles, and not go to flattening as a knee-jerk solution? There's, often we use the mental model, and this comes from one of my good friends, Michael Arena, who distinguishes between heads up versus heads down work, right? If we're in heads up work, we're talking to customers, we're building relationships, we're brainstorming with our team. Heads down work is much more independent. What we see companies go wrong with all the time is flattening when the work is heads up, because then you get these ballooning spans of control with managers. They're not able to support their team. Their employees are burnt out. They're burnt out. And you end up getting, again, these perverse incentives where the technology might be boosting individual productivity, but it isn't making a dent at the team and organizational level.
All right, so tell me specifically, again, for the folks in the room who are thinking about doing their org charts, they should be more flexible in their org charts. Okay. Probably in the long run, it'll be a little bit flatter, but what should they do tomorrow?
In terms of org charts or broadly?
In terms of org charts.
So in terms of org charts, understand what cross-functional workflows are essential in your organization and which need to change or can change in an AI era. That's why we're seeing so much emphasis, and Moderna made headlines earlier this year by merging its HR and IT departments. That's why we're seeing disproportionately that collaboration becomes so much more important now with AI, because to roll out AI, you absolutely need the technical foundations, you need the secure platform, you need the scalable platform, but you need the HR lens to understand change management, how to manage a new digital workforce. And so think about the most important relationships and workflows within your organizations, and then start to design, okay, if not formally, how do we create informal roles or workflows to start to meld those critical groups?
All right, so the only thing that I think has now come up in all three of these conversations is a love of HR, right? So in the first panel, we've got to try to prevent loneliness through HR. It's extremely important. The second, machines will never match EQ, so HR is important in here. So should my kids go into HR? That's the last question I'm going to ask you. It seems like it's pretty important in a world of AI.
It's pretty important.
Knowing my kids, they wouldn't be great at it, but if they were to get good at it, should they go into HR?
I think it's too early to understand what the HR function, will it be called HR? Probably not when you're managing a digital workforce.
AR.
And in a world where everyone will inevitably be managing AI agents, what does that look like? I think it's less about, what you should go into and starting to think about, okay, what are those skills? What are those capabilities that are going to be really important in every organization? Collaboration is absolutely one of them. And collaboration with HR is essential regardless of who you are within the organization.
Okay, that was super interesting. Thank you to Rebecca. 5 things you should all do in your organizations. That was fantastic. All right, now we're going to sum it all up. John Borthwick, founder and CEO of betaworks. Rohan Sharma, the CEO of Zenolabs.AI. And Conor Grennan, Chief AI Architect at NYU Stern School of Business. Right. John, why don't we start with you? We've been talking a lot about organizational change in AI. What is the thing that you've heard? I saw you've been over here for at least the last panel and a half that you most agree with. Let's go with agree with. I was going to say disagree with, but let's go with agree with. What do you think is most important? You, just so everybody knows, betaworks not only is an interesting company in itself, but it invests in 12 billion AI-based startups. So he's got a lot of knowledge from that too.
What do I think is most interesting?
What is most important? What do you most agree with of the various theories of change and organizational structure? What is the most important one that we've discussed?
I mean, I think that I think we're in this sort of liminal in-between moment where we're sort of moving from using AI in a sort of co-pilot augmentative fashion to starting to think about native applications of AI. And so workflows, within organizations are sort of starting to adapt. And I think the first place people start is, search and sort of the modalities which we've known and understand how to use a computer to do. And now we're beginning to explore these new modalities. So I think we're sort of in this in-between phase.
What is, of the different companies you invest in, right, and the different companies you've watched and you've studied, to term many, who has come up with the most interesting way of using AI in their internal processes? Not here's the most interesting tool you can use, but here is we figured out a totally new way to structure something or do something.
So, I mean, I'll give you an example is, when we did the prep call, I mentioned a company which is called Superposition that is doing end-to-end recruiting using AI. like really end to end. And so they're replacing a headhunter role completely with agents. And I sat down with the founder because after you and I talked, I thought I should just check in, see if I understand exactly what he's doing. And the thing which I thought was so interesting was that, you know, in the old world of recruiting, in the old world, there were these two artifacts. There was a document description, job description, and a resume, LinkedIn profile, whatever, right? There were these two documents, and the documents were essentially artifacts for the marketplace. You know, so a recruiter could take one document, or somebody in a company could take one document, find candidates. Candidates could use their artifact, their resume, to be able to. So what he's working with is a live dynamic profile of a job description, and of candidates. And so it's no longer this static.
What do you mean? It's like the job description changes based on the candidate?
So it tunes based on candidates, because if you imagine once you're interviewing a candidate, you're like, I really thought I needed somebody who does X, but talking to this person, I realized that what I really want is Y. And so you start to tune and sort of navigate, and it's doing that automatically.
Wait, so if it doesn't like the candidate, does it tune the job description so it's no longer qualified? But if it does like the candidate, it tunes it to work? This is cuckoo.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, I was looking at emails that the agent is sending out to candidates, and there was one email to a Facebook engineer that was extraordinary, because the agent sent an email, and the agent is impersonating a human, which bugs me, because I think agents should say they're agents and humans should say they're humans. But anyway, we'll leave that aside. The agent said to this particular Facebook employee, this is the kind of role we're looking for. And the agent could basically look at the potential candidates, like his GitHub profile, his LinkedIn profile, everything he said on Twitter. And it was very, very specific. And the guy emailed back and said, this job looks interesting. And this is the first recruiter that I've heard from who really has looked closely at the work I've been doing.
How do you know it wasn't just the Facebook guy's agent flattering the... Anyway, amazing stuff. Okay, this is incredible. I want to understand this. So, Rohan, what's the most interesting thing you've seen, the most interesting organizational change you've seen, or the most creative way a company's restructured?
Sure. Thank you for that. I think Rebecca brought up a very good points. I think that we are in the phase of moving from pilots to scaling. There are some successes with the pilots with some orgs. There's some don't have the success that they would like, and it largely comes down to the technology is evolving much faster than the operating model that should evolve, right?
Totally.
Large enterprises, the problem is with the structures. It's not about scaling, it's really the structures. You have to have the right governance structures. You have to have the roles have to evolve. The incentives have to evolve. The workflows have to evolve. The data pipelines have to evolve. The technology stack has to evolve, right? So the most interesting shift that I'm seeing is organizations starting to treat this as not really a tech tool, but really enterprise transformation, because that's what really is in large companies. It is a global, large enterprise transformation, which is really a cultural and a change management rollout rather than just a technology or tool.
So where do you see that being done well?
I think there are a few companies that are doing pretty well. I think there's some banks that are doing pretty well. I was at one of the closed dinners, and I think Blackstone is doing some good job in which they're having some micro apps in which they are using the data rooms to get insights out of those very well to sort of make investment decisions, make capital allocation decisions, so on and so forth. So there are use cases across different industries, but I think the wins are largely in small pilots which deliver real ROI, because if you can't map your initiatives or your pilots to a clear P&L benefit, you're just doing a shiny demo. You're not really building a capability. And some companies are doing well. Others are just stuck up in, trying to really prove value. And that's what they feel.
Totally. Conor, you've written a lot, and you have a theory that we've sort of all look at AI the wrong way. Companies look at AI the wrong way. They're sort of walking into a wall backwards. Will you explain this theory, and then we'll poke at it a little bit?
Yeah, poking at it from you always means you're going to tear it apart in front of all these people. So just gentle. All right, Nick. So the way we do it is actually very different. So our theory of work here is that this is not a digital transformation really at all. It has almost nothing. I'm talking about the inference. I'm talking about using AI. And so the idea is digital transformation, and everybody in this room almost by definition probably has done that. And I apologize, I can't remember who was saying it earlier, but it's when you use email instead of fax machines or something, and it's, you're sort of just switching out one thing for another. And so what I do with, with the big companies that I work with all the time is ask them the rhetorical question of what does like ChatGPT replace, right? We know what like Netflix replaced, we know what everything replaced. But if your brain, by the way, sorry, quick pause. If you know Marco Argenti over at Goldman Sachs, he had the best answer for this. He was like, I was on a podcast. He's like, I think it replaces mediocrity, which is the most Goldman Sachs answer ever. But if it doesn't replace anything and it's a new way of working, then we're treating it wrong, right? We're trying to teach people by using, the features and the use cases. And we argue that I think we're 3 years in. I think we know it doesn't work, but why doesn't it work? So super quick on that. The reason it doesn't work is that this is much more like a treadmill than like Excel, right? I mean, I own a treadmill somewhere in my house, and the idea is I bought this, all the features, everything, you could like run in the Andes, all that kind of stuff, right? And it turns out I don't want to run in the Andes either, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with all the features. It has everything to do with behavioral shift. So what does it mean to drive a behavioral shift? And this is the last thing I'll say before Nick rips it apart. But the idea here is that what we've done the deep dive on is not the tech, but on how we think. And the problem is all in our brain and how our brain operates, pattern, prediction, automation. And the biggest thing is, instinctively how to work with a software, right? You just know. You know how to Google things, you don't even think. You know instinctively how to work with a human. You don't even think about what that looks like. What we're asking people to do now is actually treat a software like a human. There's nothing to learn. All you have to do is talk to it like a person. And if you've told people that and you're banging your head against the wall, it's because their brain is functioning like a normal brain. Their brain doesn't talk to software like a person. So how do we get people to do that? So we use paradigms and frameworks for trying to get people to think differently.
John, do you want to respond? I feel like Conor's theory is different from your theory.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that you finally got to a place at the end where I was like, oh, okay, I think I agree with that, but the rest I don't. I mean, I think that we have extraordinary adoption. You're picking on ChatGPT, so let's just go there, right? So this time last year, 300 million users. Today, 800 million users. I mean, that's a lot of adoption. What's going on there? People are looking at this thing and they're saying, this is a better search engine. And I think about it, talk about it as an everything machine. It just like, I'm going to use it for everything, right? I'm just going to, and I don't need to leave the page, right? I can keep going. Whereas in the old search paradigm, it was a different structured paradigm, and it also presumed, much to pleasure of Nick and other publishers, that you would leave and go click on some links. And in this case, you're just digging deep. I see how my kids are using this thing, these models, and they use them for everything, right? And so I think it's a better search engine out the box. Now, I agree with you that trying to teach and people adapting and learning how to interface with these machines is very complex. And I think specifically in the workplace, I think about work sometimes with bundles of tasks, and organizations need to be able to disaggregate and think about the bundles of tasks and figure out how AI can actually make that work better. And I think he's a gentleman from IBM, lady who said, that most organizations are siloed, and those silos, you need to break them down, and so that you can look across the entire bundle of tasks. And so, so lots in there, but yeah.
All right, Connie, you want to respond, and then Rohan, I'll have you adjudicate and decide who's correct.
Yeah, super quick. So John's way off on this. I feel like it's a Maury Povich style. No, this is the great thing, right? Is that I agree that adoption, if you measure it by that, is very, very high. Where I would disagree is that if I ask everybody in this room who uses Excel, right, every hand goes up. If I say who's used Excel to do at least one $5 million valuation and it was 15 formulas, Two investment banker hands go up. To me, you're not going to transform an organization with a better search engine. And to me, the reason young people are using it in longer conversations is they're completely incentivized. My kids who are in high school are totally incentivized by writing a better paper on Hamlet. Their future prospects in life go up overnight. That doesn't happen with tenured people. So what we find is that people are using it a few times a week. That's a better search engine. That's a little bit of a linear thing. The transformation is when people have 40-minute long conversations. What Rebecca said about the 9%, that's where we want to be. We want to have people treating this like a person. And that conversation is 40 minutes long in, let's call it ChatGPT. It's not a better search engine. I think John and I probably agree.
Wait, so Conor, your theory is that we could be getting so much more if we just changed our framework up. We're getting something, but not remotely enough.
Not remotely. Yeah, I think that there's a way that people think they're using AI, and that's because they're using it 4 times a week to sort of do emails, and it's better. It's if we landed the spaceship on a planet that was only walking, and the first thing we brought out was a bicycle. People were like, this is amazing. And meanwhile, you have like planes and trains and cars inside. You're like, wait, there's so much more this can do. And it doesn't come from learning. That's the point. With Excel, at least, you have to study. Like I'm at a business school. You have to like learn that. This you don't have to learn. It's all just usage and behavior. That's where I would sort of
Rohan?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, final thoughts there. I think both have very valid points. I 100% agree with that this technology, you have to be and sort of work with it, conversate with it like a normal human, and sort of evolve in. I 100% agree with another point that people are not using to the best of their ability, because the more context you can give, the more you use it, the more you connect to the tools, the more value you can extract out of it. And most people are using it at a very basic level. So I think the adoption is there, but at the full extract that you can get out of the technology isn't there, both at the personal level, certainly at the enterprise level.
Wait, but Conor, go back to this. You're saying like we're not treating it like a human. The first example John gave us was a headhunting company that is so confident you're going to respond to it like a human that it's impersonating a human, right? Aren't we are treating it like a human, in fact, sometimes to ill effect.
I would say that I would disagree. So I would say that there's a lot of people using, character AI. I don't know what the numbers are. It's like 9 million a month or something, right? So there's certainly a demographic that is treating this like a person. No question about it. I'm talking sort of like in the enterprise model. The problem is that our brains are not equipped to use this because it doesn't, talk to it like a person, because it doesn't look like a person. The thing that took us like probably 18 months to figure out was when people see let's call it ChatGPT window, what their brain is literally seeing is a search engine. In the same way, when you see a kitten, you think you're going to think, I wonder if that's an MIT professor or something. You don't think that, right? Your brain works on visual cues, right? That's what it's doing with this. Your brain literally thinks it's seeing a Google search engine, which means you're literally interacting with it like a Google search engine. Not that it can't be searched. The problem is, how do you act with a Google search engine? You give it a command, you get a response, and you walk away. Now, that's great. ChatGPT is going to, or Gemini or anything else, is going to give you a much better answer. And it feels like this is amazing. It's much more like a person. But if it was a person, you don't just ask, like if I have Jeff Bezos sitting here, I don't ask him one thing and then just like, I'm like, great, I'm going to walk. Yeah, that's enough. Thanks, Jeff. No more, right? You have a 40-minute long conversation with him. We don't tend to do that with ChatGPT. So yes, there's a huge demographic using it as a person, are young people, for example, and people on character AI. But generally speaking, I'm not seeing that's how people are using it in enterprise.
Can I pick up off that?
Please, that's why we're here.
I mean, I think that I agree that, look, there are technologies out there, and there are quite a few interfaces. I think it's partially an interface issue. Is there quite a few interfaces that are being grafted from the search interface or the impersonating human interface, like sending an email, which is in fact an agent, looking like a person, but is in fact an AI. I think that I'm much more interested in the native interfaces that people are starting to experiment with. So, I'll give you an example. I have an AI ring, which I've been using this week. That's one of our company called Sandbar. And I chat with it. So I put my AirPods in, and I'm on my way to this event, and I have a conversation with it. When you set up this product, it actually trains on your voice. So the voice that speaks back to me sounds like me. The product is called Sandbar. It has no attempt. It's not called Jane or Ken or Julie or anything. It's not attempting to pretend to be a person. And you talk to the founder about it, and he thinks it's like talking to an inner voice. And it is kind of. And so there's a new sort of interface of how you can talk to AI. And I agree with you. Look, we jump into the car and we think, okay, this is this electric car looks just like a internal combustion car. I'm going to drive it the same way and do everything the same. And then over time you realize, wait, I can actually let go of the wheel. And so we're just at that point where we're learning.
Not all electric cars, John. Please do not mislead the audience. Only the self-driving ones. Yes. But keep going.
We're just at the point where we're learning that there's other capabilities here.
Rohan?
Yeah, I think final thoughts. I think just like enterprises are navigating the maturity, I think individuals are navigating the maturity, how they use technology. There are all sorts of modalities. There's text, there's voice, people who are experimenting with filmmaking and image and putting a lot of context into it, certainly have a little bit more maturity in how they're using this technology. I personally been using, I would consider myself a power user, and I've started using AI as literally a digital companion, right? So it's been a while. So
as a what?
Sort of companion in the sense you talk to them just like to guide you, to navigate you the complexities from literally fixing your plumbing issues at your home, literally to
emotional companion, or just like helping your plumbing
companion, like in terms of household companion, like, hey, my garage is leaking, or there's a plumbing issue, or there's electrical. You talk with Gemini. Gemini has a live mode. You can show them, you can talk to them.
Totally.
Like so I think there's a different level of maturity. You can't expect that with everyone because not everyone is comfortable with using and switching multiple models and modalities and so on and so forth. But I think as time grows on, I think I consider this whole AI wave as second or third year in the large 10-year adoption wave, both for personally as well as for enterprise. It's a 10-year adoption curve. And I think we are in second or third, very early innings of this.
All right, Conor, we have a minute and 20. What do you most want to see happen in the next year that will get people to use AI, organizations to change in positive directions with AI?
Yeah, I agree with Rohan and with John. This is an interface problem and it is a behavioral problem. I want to see upskilling across entire organizations, not just from leadership. And I want to see upskilling in a totally different way. I want to see it a behavioral-based upskilling. So just, super quick. If you can imagine you're planning a trip to Costa Rica and like behind door number 1 is a Google search engine and you're like, okay, give me the top 10 things. And then instead you go behind door number 2 and it's the head of the Costa Rican tourism board. You would never say like, give me the top 10 things. And he'd be like, sure, who's going? You're like, sir, just give me the top 10 things, right? Why? Because you see it's a human. The way you're interacting with a human is wildly different. So I want to take people, and what we do is we take people through paradigms to help them understand what their brain is glitching on here and give them frameworks to understand this is not just a better search engine. But I agree with John and Rohan. This is an interface question, and especially I love what Rohan just said. This is a longer transition. We keep thinking, oh, it's good. I love the voice thing. That's amazing. But we keep thinking it's just going to be this. Now that'll get us over. No, this is going to take longer. It's the human brain.
All right. Amazing. Well, what a fun day that was. We talked about organizational change. We talked about the future of agents. We talked about how organizations should shift. And we talked about John's ring. And we talked about some phony HR recruitment. It's amazing. Oh, actually, HR came up in all 4 panels. What a wonderful day. Thank you all for coming. Great conversations. And thank you to Glean for hosting us. Wonderful host, wonderful conversations. Thank you so much.
To learn more about Glean and what's next, register for their Agents of Change event happening on December 10th at 10 a.m. PT. Scan the QR code on screen or head to glean.com/glean-live and grab your spot.